Hi class, throughout this semester you're going to be working on different designs of art projects to illustrate concepts and for creative exploration. So I want to talk to you a bit about the design process and how you take an idea from a concept to a finished work. This would be true for a number of classes that you'll end up taking over your career, two-dimensional design, drawing, painting, any kind of two-dimensional project really. You have a process in the design, printmaking. So this is very useful for all the different types of classes you're doing when you're working in two dimension. I like this next illustration because it shows you sort of a layout of the kind of things you have. So you have research and you're doing a lot of things. When you're doing research, you're doing quick little notational type of diagram, thumbnail drawings. Out of that comes idea generation. It kind of goes back and forth. Um, Up here on this, we could say actually at the top is another idea, which is sometimes you have a brief. Okay, so you have like the original assignment or brief from a client or an idea in general that is your own creation. So this would be where I say to you, all right, do a drawing about blah de blah. Make line drawings that illustrate a certain concept. Make a still life that has something that relates to a particular person. There's lots of different type of assignments you could get over your college career or in life. So you have to do research, taking quick little notational type of sketches and then coming up with ideas and then coming back to this possibly and maybe coming through here a few times. Out of that becomes like ref sketches, which are more refined but not finished. And you kind of can think of this as like concept development, back and forth, rough sketches, concept development. And you refine sketches when you develop the concept more clearly. This could be for a product, like down here showing cars being made, but it would also be true of like a design that you're trying to communicate something. You say, well, I'm not communicating, I'm just expressing myself in fine art. Personally, I think that's not true. If you're making anything, you are communicating something, even if you're only communicating an aesthetic experience. Form and content are very much connected. And what do I mean by that? The formal things that you pick, the way you pick to show things, the color choices, the line quality, the initial idea, how you crop something, all of these type of things are formal. Well, the content is what you depict, like the subject matter, and then behind it, the kind of meaning that comes out of it. And then out of that, you end up with refined sketches. And then if it was a product, it would be a concept proposal to have it be made. Or if it was a sculpture, it would be about making the sculpture. Or if the end piece is the refined sketches, you would take it the next step into making a finished piece of art. So that applies to a lot of different types of classes you would take. Now let's look at one strategy for this research that I find really useful is brainstorming, right? How do you brainstorm things? There's different ways to do it. You could just free associate and write and draw things, but I find it really useful to do these thought bubble exercises where you have something in the middle, like, for this you could just say project in the middle, and then things come out of it. For here we have family, and then when generations, okay, siblings, circle, relationships, head, home, and then out of home they got things like nest. This is like a big web one. You can do all of that, right? You can go through and interconnect a big web, or you could pick something out like generations or connections and then create a new one, right? And then go, okay, here's one of these ideas, and I'll pull out a new one, and then I'll go 5, 6, 7, 8 ideas, and then something out of it comes that's interesting, like handwriting is about personal and family is a relationship and personal. So you go handwriting. Okay, what about handwriting? Letter choices, style of writing, you know, signature versus uppercase, lowercase, stuff like that. That would be formal things. And so in some way, your handwriting can end up becoming a version of you in written form that could talk about your relationships with your family. And then you might, in your project, be like, I want to capture someone in my family, like my dad or mom's handwriting style, and use that as part of the project. So there's all kinds of things you could end up with here. If you were like doing something like scripted or with text, then that would be a really interesting way to start talking about family, right? So there's many, many ways you could do this, but I think that this thought bubble exercise is really good. So that would be connected to this part right here, research. What else would be ways you could research is looking up imagery online of certain things you're thinking about making and how, and also in life, drawing and having some kind of research that's visual research, like you want to make something about it with a car in it. Well, what kind of car? Look up some pictures of cars. Maybe you want your own car, so go outside and draw your car, right? So that's part of research as well. And when you're doing these quick early on notations, it's like thumbnails, little drawings that are the size of your thumbnail, right? Not literally, but that's the point of it. Small things. This is from a book where the artist designer was creating a logo for a church. So they're doing quick little thumbnails. I think this right here is what I really, 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 I'm saying it a lot of times because I want you to do is think with your pen or pencil on the paper. Think. Think and move your pen and pencil at the same time. Don't say, I'm going to think about a million things and then maybe draw something. Literally use your pen and pencil to think with. That means it's kind of a discipline of, as you're thinking of things, draw little images that relate to it for you and back and forth. Just make a bunch of little chicken scratch things even at first if you need to. Because you need to have in visual art, you need to have things that are visually look a certain way to go with these. How can I show you generations? That's a concept. Well, that's what you need. That's why you need your pen and pencil on the paper to start. You can write words, but you start drawing things that show connection. Well, how do you show connection? Two hands holding hands, a bridge, generations, old and young person. So you have a picture, a big person and a small person, right? So you need that imagery to start the process going. You need grain to grind to make in your grain mill to make bread with. You're going to be making bread, so you need the ingredients. This is from a book, The Left-Handed Designer. I really like this guy, Seymour Schwartz. He's has a design group he started back in the day called Pushpin Design Group. I'm not sure if it's actually in existence anymore. I think it is, but he was doing something for a design for Charles Dickens' Nicholas Nickleby, right? It's a book. And he kind of used some materials that were supplied to him. He had a briefing with a person, so it was a specific project. You could think of your project sheets I give you as a sort of brief. When you get into making your own art, you kind of want to have your own internal brief. It's also often a good idea to write it down, actually. And then the research, and then developing first sketches, which is something like that's pretty refined, but it's good. His research was bringing in things from the history of British cartoons. And then he kind of started to have a preparation for it to be done, so he started doing black and white, revising it and making it nicer. And he got something that he liked finished with the gray tones, and he gave him a proof the proof is something that went to the publisher, and then he realized, oh, it needs something else to improve it to be on his shoulders instead of around him. So a big change happened. Um, that was something important because this is actually, it says up here for a telecast of it. That was a big change because it gives it a very different meaning of it on his shoulders versus just around him. So he presented the revision, and then he had to make other materials for it to make a poster and things like that. And then eventually it was printed. So this is the final work. The final work. I think I'm pausing for you just to look at it and think about all that process that came into this and how it changed step by step to become the best piece for the idea. He kept refining it every step of the way so it could become the best version of it. That's what you need to do. You have something small and you start refining it and making it better every step of the way until you end up with the best piece you can make at that time. Later on, if you get better at drawing or art or something, of course it could be better, but the idea is to keep refining every time. Okay. Now I want to show you a tutorial to lay out a live area. This is what it would be called in comics when you do, or certain types of other illustration. What is it? It's the area that you're on your paper that you will fill with the drawing. Okay? It doesn't include the paper margins, but corresponds to the outline of all the panels. If you're doing like a comic page, it would be, well, this is kind of a bad way to draw it, but nonetheless, you get the idea from it. You have all your little panels. You have 9 of them or 12 of them, whatever it would be. And they're all over here. And the live area is where they all line up square inside. So you have even borders all the way around it. Okay? Not necessarily the most delicate and amazing screen drawing, but I think it gets the idea across there. This is the live area. All the panels will fit inside of it, and you have a border, the green being the edge of the paper. So no matter if you're doing something with a bunch of panels or say you're just doing something that has, let's see if we can do it lined this way. That'll be better. Oop, a little too light. Got to get used to these tools. Okay. Say you're just doing something that, you know, is one thing in the middle of it. Well, you still want to lay it out just so you have it square to the edge, right? Even if this is one big image on your page, you want the first steps to be so it's square to the edge. What does square mean? So that these are parallel and you have a 90-degree angle that matches the 90-degree angle on the edge of your paper. So in this tutorial with pictures, I'll be using 3:4 ratio and 12:16 paper, but you could use this for any size and ratio you need. What do I mean by 3:4 ratio? Well, 3:4 ratio means that the width to the height, or if it's long ways, the width to the height, is in a ratio of 3:4. So if you were laying out and you wanted a 9:12 panel, if you divide 9:3 and 12:3, you get 3 and 4, right? So you have a ratio of a size of the panel. Why is this important? You're like, what's he talking about? Math and art and all this? This doesn't make any sense. Well, it's important because Say that you are designing something that's really small and you have it like this, it's like this big. That's your little your little refined sketches, right? And you want it to be looking the same in the space as you did here when you make it bigger. Well, that's a bad line. Then you need the proportions to be the same. So if I try to design something in here and then make it work in here, it's not going to work. Why? Because it's a different shape space, really different shape here. But if I do it where it's double or triple but the same proportion, so let's say this is an inch and then I want it to be 3. Well, if I do it 3 inches and then say that's an inch and a half, and then I do it 3 times an inch and a half or 4 times an inch and a half for 6 inches, then it'll end up becoming the same sort of overall proportion, right? So if I design something 3 inches by 4 inches, a small little sketch, when I make it 9 by 12, it'll have the same feeling in this space. So that's an important thing to think about when you're doing your rough drafts, that you kind of have them roughly the same scale, height and width as your final piece will be. Okay? I think it'll make a little more sense as we go along. If you're still not sure what I'm talking about, feel free to post some questions and I can try to answer them specifically for you. So you don't have to have a T-square or a triangle. You really only need paper, a ruler, and a pencil. But these other things that are, possible supplies that you could get, I have them as optional on your supply list. Can help you a little bit sometimes, but we're not going to get too hung up on that. You lay down the paper, and if you're using a drawing board, you want it to be square, parallel, and you want it to be oftentimes good to tape it down. So do it if you were using a T-square. You get it like that, tape down and square. You make sure it's working. And if you aren't using this, then you use your ruler, and you have to make sure your ruler's square to the edge of the paper, like going along the bottom. And you first measure the length, in from each side, the amount of space you want, right? And you do marks down here. See, like that. And then you do marks the same at the top if you're not using a T-square. If you are using a T-square, you can save yourself some time, because then you just have to put it up here and draw downward. But first, you want to make sure you're measuring it out. For that would be for this way. And then for this, the borders going horizontally, you want to measure up on this side each way. So you end up with lines that are there and lines that are going this way on the line. Okay? You'll end up with these little squares on the edge. That's fine for you to have those. You can erase those afterwards. But what it's doing is making sure that your borders are even. Sometimes, depending on the shape or size you're drawing, you can't make them even all the way around. The main thing is that they're square to the edge of the paper, that they're parallel, and that on each side they're even. So you might have a bigger border on the top and bottom than on each side, left and right, but you want them to be the same on the left, same on the right, same on the top and bottom overall. Unless you're really designing it so that there is an exception, so that you're going to show it as a finished work on the paper, then you may want to purposely have a little bit of weight at the bottom. It's called bottom weighted. That's something people do occasionally. But for your projects, I want you to first off just focus on keeping them the same on the left and right and top and bottom. So you end up doing that. You keep going and you get every side put together, and then you end up with a final, that's the live area. So this example would be a rectangular area that has 90-degree corners that is 16 inches high and 12 inches wide. it was on 14 by 17 paper. You could use a ruler. It's harder, but you have to really be a little more careful when you do it. And when you use a ruler, you really have to measure the space from here very carefully. So if you're trying to get it from over here to there to make the upward line, you have to really make sure your ruler's dead on. The number 1 where it's 0 line is really on the edge of the page, and get it really accurately. So it takes a little more work sometimes. Either way, you have to be careful, but sometimes it's a little can be a little harder with the T-square, but it's totally doable. That's why I recommend getting a clear ruler like this, because you can really make sure that the line is lining up to the edge of the page. And so if you see here, they first did this line, and then they measured on that line to give themselves the vertical line. You could do it either way. If you measure from here over, and you get little tick marks. And then that would help you get this line all the way up, right? And then on this line, you would measure like an inch, and you'd go, okay, do it like right there. And then you would have, but you need to have this side first, so you want both sides. And if you measure the little inch on here, and then that will give you, you measure from there to there, that'll give you the line that goes this way. And you do the same over here. You go, okay, measure up an inch, little tick, measure up an inch, little tick, and then draw the line all the way across. Okay, what's the point? You measure the distance vertically on the horizontal line, right? And you measure or if you measure the horizontal distance from the edge, then you measure it on the vertical line. Either way, you have to pick which one you're going to start with. So I think it's easier to start with the horizontal line at the bottom of your paper, measure up, get the ticks, draw it, and then go in and in on each side. Okay? Something that you want to think about is the sort of math of it, which is fairly easy some of the time. If you're doing something on 18 by 24 paper, right, and you need it to be, or 14 by 17 paper, and they wanted it to be 12 by 16, well, that's fairly easy. 12 from 14 is an inch on each side, and 16 is a half an inch, right? So you'd have half inch on each side even, and an inch and an inch. But it could get a little more complicated if you're doing a stranger size paper relationship to the live area. So that's something you're going to want to think about when you're doing it, which is, firstly, you have to know what your paper size is, in this case 14 by 17, and then you need to know what your total area is going to be. So 12 by 16 in this, they said right here. Then what you do, like I said, is you take the corresponding measurements, so the width and the width, and you subtract them from each other. So that would be 12 14 minus 12 ends up with, it's not working. It's not letting me type. Oh, that's unfortunate. So 14 minus 12 is going to end up with, here we go. Oh man, technical problems. Equals 2, right? So 2, and then you divide it in half, 0.5 equals 1 inch on each side, right? So, sorry for the awkward little drawings here and speech bubbles. I I think it's good to show you the kind of awkwardness. Actually, I thought about for a second stopping it and re-recording this part, but I like this because it shows you that we all kind of have to figure it out on the fly as we're going and go through the motions and go, okay, what am I doing? And then we have 17, so we go 17 minus 16, so that would be the height, equals 1. And then you 1 divided by 0.5 equals 0.5, or it would be 2. So 1 divided by 2, actually, not 0.5, bad math. 2 equals 0.5, and so over here, 2 divided by 2 equals 1. So in half, I got my math skills wrong. Good thing I'm not a math professor, eh? So you're always dividing it in half, so you're going to do it by 2. So that's kind of showing you that you want each side to be even in size. If it's more complex and you have more panels involved, then you have to decide what you want the distance between them to be and kind of lay it out more complexly so that it's more like a full comics page. So at the end of it, you would have your live area that you decided on, and then you would start to use that to draw your little panels on with like a comic. This is what they would be doing. They would use, and the very corner panel, say you had like 9 of them, would all go up to the very edge of the live area, right? And you'd have one over here, exactly the same size, like 4 by 5. And then you would have the different ones in here. And then that would be, get a little more complicated because you have to decide how big the spaces are between them to get it all fleshed out. When we're doing projects like that, I will do a secondary demonstration on an actual piece of paper for you so you can see the detail of that and how I do it. But I just want you to understand the overall concept of laying out the general area first, and then also see the design process so your brain can start kind of wrapping around those ideas and how you design something through the steps, and also just the basic idea of measuring and getting an area that you're going to do your work inside of. And then I'll get specific with the different projects in how you do some panels and things if you need to do them. All right. So just have a look at this whole thing again. I'll post a PDF of these slides so that you can have a look at it and reference it if you need to. And then ask questions in the question answer cafe if you have questions about it. So this is for you to review again if you need to in the future. And I hope you're all, enjoying the start of the semester, getting used to what's going on and just slowly getting your way into it. It's kind of like we have to jump in with both feet and get going on it. So you can do it. I believe in you. Just make sure you ask questions and engage with the discussion boards, okay? All right, take care. We'll talk to you soon.